He played pro football, got into MMA, made an impression on The Ultimate Fighter 10, and lost in the finals to Roy Nelson. However, since that, he's knocked off 3 consecutive wins, with his latest being Gabriel Gonzaga at UFC 121. He's 7-1, hailing from Aurora, Colorado. Brendan, the hybrid Schaub. Brendan, thank you for joining us today, dude.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Well, Brendan, why don't you, right off the hop here, give us a bit of your history. You started playing pro football. What was the pro football experience like for you, and how did you get into MMA?
Man, that's pretty vague. Well, I played football at CU. I was there for 4 years. I would do boxing, jiu-jitsu to stay in shape for the football season. Mm-hmm. Grew up doing martial arts. My dad's really involved in taekwondo and karate. He's a second-degree black belt in both. So I just kind of grew up around that atmosphere, and really the movie Bloodsport kind of sparked my interest when I was young. And the first UFC was here in Denver, and just kind of fell in love with it. And it was only a matter of time before I started pursuing it as a profession.
So Bloodsport was the one the movie that inspired you the most. What about Karate Kid? Were you ever into the Karate Kid?
Nah, man, I was not into Karate Kid at all. Doesn't even, I don't even like the movie, man. Did nothing for me.
So you were a Jean-Claude Van Damme guy?
Huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fan. Bloodsport, Kickboxer, all of them, man. Cyborg, I loved all of them.
Speaking of Cyborg, your nickname is Hybrid. How did you get that?
I got that from the staff on Ultimate Fighter. All the camera crew and the producers called me the Hybrid. I guess I didn't know this till the show was over, and they came up with that because I was definitely one of the smallest guys in the house, and they said I was a mix. I had the speed of a lightweight, but hit like a heavyweight. They called me the hybrid of the heavyweights. So that's how that came about. So
make sure you support Brendan Schaub because he's good for the environment. Correct?
That's right, man.
Your experience, you were talking about the Ultimate Fighter 10. Just tell us about your experience on Top 10 and sort of the things that you learned, and what was that whole experience like for you?
Man, that seems like ages ago. It was a good time for me, man. It was the way, it was my way into the UFC, and there can be a bigger platform, and, our season was the biggest ever, so, I knew if I did well on that show, it kind of sent me in the right direction for a good UFC career if, I just train hard, and, it's a real thing what the Ultimate Fighter does for fighters. It gives you a fan base and, kind of get you out there in front of the world, which is hard to do for a lot of fighters if they don't go through the Ultimate Fighter.
Did you like having the cameras around you all the time, following you?
It didn't bother me at all, man. I knew how big of an opportunity it was and how big of a stage, and I definitely definitely took advantage of it, and I just lived in the moment, and it worked out great for me.
Yeah, and in the final, you obviously lost to Roy Nelson. Does that loss still haunt you, or do you think that it was a major learning experience to sort of catapult you to those 3 consecutive wins?
It definitely doesn't haunt me. Beating a guy like Gabriel Gonzaga, I think that shows where my mindset's at. Roy and I are friends, and I definitely learned a lot in that loss, and got caught, and that can happen to anyone, and I'm on a good path now. So, I don't think about that one too much. You
mentioned Gonzaga. Give us your thoughts on that fight. Were you happy? Obviously, you're happy with the decision, but were you happy with how you performed?
Yeah, I think my last 2 fights in the UFC, they went so quick. I really couldn't show all the hard work I've put in, and they were on. It just didn't work out. I'd get done, and I was so unsatisfied. So, they gave me a really tough opponent in Gabriel Gonzaga, and it was a huge step up for me. And, it was great to go in there and mix it up with a guy like that.
You say it's a step up for you. Are you ready to move up to the upper tier of the UFC heavyweight division?
Well, let's see. So Dos Santos beat Gabriel Gonzaga, and he got a title shot. Shane Carlin beat him. He got a title shot. I think Gabe's one of those guys where, especially now, in Gabe's career, it's kind of it's a good indicator where you're at. I feel like I can compete with anyone in the division, and whatever Dana White and Joe Silva want to do, I'm ready for the task, and they've taken great care of me, and they show my appreciation like going on, putting on a good show. So, I definitely can't compete with any of those top guys.
You probably heard Frank Mir told MMASucka.com here that he'd rather fight you than Brock Lesnar. How do you respond to that?
I say let's do it. After the 121 fight, after I beat Gonzaga, they asked, who I'd like to fight next if it was up to me, and I said Frank Mir. That's not an easy fight by any means. I grew up a huge Frank Mir fan, and it'd be an honor to fight him like that. But don't get it twisted. I'm not the type of guy, these other guys who fight guys who they grew up liking and hugging and holding hands in the cage. The way I show my respect is I go in and I'm going to put an ass whooping on them. So that's the way I show my respect. I think that's different than a lot of other guys. I think it'd be a great fight, and especially, coming off of 3 wins here and beating a contender in Gabriel Gonzaga, to me it makes sense, but it's kind of out of my hands. So, I'd love a shot at Frank Mir.
So there would be no Pat Barry, Mirko Krokop shit going on in the cage if you two got in there?
No, I don't get down with that shit, man. I go in there and I look to finish, and the way I show my opponents respect is I train my ass off, man. And I've never trained so hard for anyone than when I fight Gabriel Gonzaga, and that's just the way I show my respect. I've trained hard in every camp, but the harder the fighter, the bigger the name, the harder I train, and that's my respect to them. They deserve it, and they deserve the best fighter in there, the best opponent, and with Frank Mir, man, sky's the limit as hard as this camp's going to be. So we'll see. I haven't heard. I'm just waiting for the call.
Do you think Frank sees you as an easier fight because he's afraid to fight Lesnar for the rubber match?
Not at all. I think if you read that interview that you guys did with him, I was a huge fan of the UFC before I was ever involved in mixed martial arts, and Frank versus Brock right now doesn't make sense. Brock, he's coming off a loss. Frank just had a really kind of nonchalant buddy sparring match with Mirko Krokop. Maybe if Frank gets by me, that makes sense, and Brock gets by, that makes sense, man. Then maybe, for a title shot, that makes sense. But right now, man, no one wants to see that. So I think they should both give those guys a different opponent, and then the winner of that fight each other.
So basically, you're calling out Frank Mir. You want him next?
Yeah, no doubt. I've already done it. I did in the UFC 121 post conference, and this will be the second time I do it.
Absolutely. If the UFC decides not to go with Mir, who would you like to face next? If it wasn't Frank Mir, do you have any other options?
Again, man, I shoot for the moon and hope to land on the stars. So, by calling out Frank Mir, he's as big as they get. So I'm shooting for the moon there, and hopefully, if that doesn't happen, I'll land on a star like Mirko Krokop, another legend who I'd love to fight.
Cool. Roy Nelson, switching gears here. Roy Nelson has had some legal issues with a contract outside of the UFC. You've probably heard of it. So he's obviously out of the picture. Just give us your thoughts on that, because you are friends with Roy, and just sort of your thoughts. Is it sort of a sticky situation when guys who are competing in outside organizations that sort of touch pen to paper and sign contracts that maybe aren't in their best interest, or maybe they don't know much about? Just give us your thoughts on that whole situation.
I got to be honest with you. I haven't talked to Roy about it, and I really don't know the exact details of the situation. My brother's a big MMA head, and he kind of let me know about it, so it's been secondhand news to me. I know it has to do something with the Roy Jones contract, and to me, it's just always a crappy situation when